There is a dangerous and entirely false myth perpetuated by modern society. The myth says that if a man reaches his 60s and lives alone, if he has chosen not to remarry, or if he actively avoids the modern dating scene, he must be broken. Society whispers that he is bitter. They assume his heart has turned to stone, that he hates women, or that he has simply surrendered to depression and defeat. But if you actually sit down and speak to a senior man who has mastered his solitude, you will quickly realize how entirely wrong society is. You will not find a man who is broken. You will find a man who has reached an elite level of absolute clarity and inner peace. When a man lives alone for a long time, an intense psychological alchemy takes place. The silence of his home forces him to face his own demons. And once he conquers the fear of being alone, something incredible happens. His entire perception of women and romantic relationships fundamentally changes. He is no longer driven by desperation, biological panic, or the fear of dying alone. And because of this, he develops what almost feels like a superpower. Today, we are going to explore the 7 profound psychological shifts that happen to a senior man's mind after he has lived alone long enough. This is how he truly sees women. Let's look under the surface. He focuses entirely on patterns instead of potential. When a man is young, his biology is his master. His testosterone levels and his evolutionary drive to mate trick his brain into entering a state of constant delusion. Psychologists call this the halo effect. When a young man meets an attractive woman, he projects an entire fantasy onto her. He falls in love with her potential. He falls in love with the idealized version of who she could be in the future. But the senior man who has lived alone has survived the brutal meat grinder of past relationships. He has survived the catastrophic crashes of the honeymoon phase. He knows that the first 6 months of any relationship are just 2 representatives meeting each other, because he is at peace with his solitude. His biological desperation is gone. The blinders have been removed. He no longer hallucinates a perfect future. Instead, he watches her patterns. He knows that behavior is a language. He doesn't care about the sweet words she texts him. He watches how she handles stress. He watches how she treats people who can do nothing for her. He watches her consistency. A younger man will ignore a dozen red flags just to avoid sleeping alone. The solitary senior man will walk away from a supermodel if her behavioral patterns threaten the peace of his quiet, ordered life. He cannot be tricked by an ideal because he only deals in reality. He achieves total freedom from the need for external validation for the first 50 years of a man's life. Society teaches him that his worth is determined by how women perceive him. He's taught to flex his muscles, flash his wealth, hide his insecurities, and mold his personality to fit whatever the woman in front of him desires. He is a performer in a never-ending circus, terrified that if he shows his true self, he will be rejected. But when a senior man spends years living alone, he becomes intimately acquainted with himself. In the silence of his solitary home, there is no one to perform for. If he wants to eat cereal for dinner, he does. If he wants to spend 5 hours reading about ancient Rome, he does. He builds his self-esteem from the inside out, brick by brick. By the time he re-enters the dating world or interacts with women, the performance is permanently over. He no longer feels the burning need to impress anyone. He doesn't exaggerate his finances. He doesn't pretend to like her hobbies just to win favor. This absolute authenticity is incredibly jarring for many women who are used to men bending over backwards for their approval. But to the older man, it is liberation. He knows exactly who he is. If a woman likes him, wonderful. If she doesn't like him, that is also wonderful because he is perfectly happy going back to his quiet, peaceful house. He has reclaimed his soul. He develops the ability to truly listen, reading between the lines of what is unsaid. When a man is driven by neediness, his listening skills are horribly compromised. A needy man doesn't listen to a woman to understand her. He listens to figure out what he needs to say next to get what he wants. He hears what he hopes to hear. But the senior man who has faced the profound silence of living alone has become a master of acoustics, because his mind is no longer cluttered with the loud, frantic noise of his own desperation. His internal world is completely quiet, and because his mind is quiet, he can finally hear her. He notices the hesitation before she speaks. He reads the exact meaning behind her silence. He registers the subtle body language that betrays her true emotions. He no longer takes her words at face value. If she says, "I'm fine," he doesn't blindly accept it, nor does he aggressively interrogate her. He simply registers the discrepancy between her words and her energy. He listens to the psychological subtext. This makes him an incredibly profound conversationalist, but it also means it is practically impossible to lie to him. He completely abandons the need to blame women for his past pain. It is very common for men who have gone through brutal divorces or heartbreaks in their 40s and 50s to enter their senior years carrying a massive toxic burden of resentment. They become bitter. They label all women as selfish, manipulative, or untrustworthy. They build a wall of anger to protect themselves from ever being hurt again. But the solitary man who has truly done the inner work in his empty house reaches a higher tier of enlightenment. Through deep introspection, he realizes that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. He achieves a state of radical psychological objectivity. He looks back at his failed marriage, and instead of saying, "She was a monster who ruined my life," he says, "We were two deeply flawed human beings who were fundamentally incompatible in our core values." He stops viewing his past relationships as malicious attacks and starts viewing them as painful but necessary lessons in human nature. By removing the villain narrative, he frees himself. When he meets a new woman today, he doesn't punish her for the sins of his ex-wife. He approaches her with a clean slate, entirely free from the baggage of the past. He develops a flawless, instantaneous radar for identifying true intentions. By the time a man reaches 60, he has usually accumulated some level of resources: a pension, a paid-off house, a retirement fund, or simply a stable drama-free lifestyle. And in the dating market, a peaceful, financially stable older man is an incredibly highly sought-after prize for women who are seeking safety and rescue from their own chaotic lives. The younger man is easily blinded by flattery. If a woman pays attention to him, his ego swells, and he willingly opens his wallet. But the solitary senior man has disconnected his ego from his wallet because he has lived alone and managed his own life entirely by himself. His boundaries are made of steel. He develops an X-ray vision for identifying resource extractors. He can instantly distinguish between a woman who is genuinely interested in the geometry of his mind and a woman who is merely auditing him for a retirement plan. He understands that many women, especially later in life, are looking for a soft place to land. While he has no problem being generous to a woman he truly loves, he absolutely refuses to be used as a human ATM or an emotional rescue boat. If he senses even a hint of entitlement, or if he feels he is being evaluated for his utility rather than his humanity, he will cut the connection instantly without a second thought. He guards his hard-earned kingdom fiercely. He looks at the women he meets with profound empathy, recognizing their hidden loneliness. When you spend years living alone, you inevitably go to war with the monster of loneliness. You face the quiet Friday nights. You face the holidays alone. You face the terrifying silence. The senior man who has survived this crucible has come out the other side. He's no longer afraid of the dark because he knows the exact texture and weight of true loneliness. He can spot it in others instantly. No matter how much makeup a woman wears, no matter how much she curates her social media, no matter how loudly she laughs, he sees the tired, lonely girl hiding behind the armor. A lesser man, a manipulative man, would use this hidden vulnerability to his advantage. He would prey on her loneliness to get what he wants. But the enlightened senior man operates with a heavy heart full of grace. He doesn't judge her for her walls. He understands how hard it is to be human. He views her struggles with profound empathy. This paradigm shift means he treats the women he interacts with a profound, gentle respect. He becomes a safe harbor, not because he wants to use them, but because he honors the shared human condition. The ultimate realization of the solitary man, a woman is no longer the solution. For his entire life, society, movies, and music brainwashed him with a single dangerous narrative: you are only half of a soul. You must find your better half to be complete. A woman will fix your loneliness. A woman will bring meaning to your empty life. When he lived alone, he realized the terrifying truth: no human being can save you from yourself. A woman cannot be the band-aid for your trauma. A woman cannot be the source of your happiness. Putting that massive burden onto a romantic partner is a recipe for disaster and resentment. He did the brutal work of fixing his own life. He found his own purpose. He learned to cook his own meals, clean his own soul, and generate his own joy. He became a complete self-sustaining ecosystem. Therefore, his entire paradigm of dating shifts. He no longer looks for a woman to be his savior or his better half. He is already whole. He only looks for a companion, a fellow traveler, an addition to an already beautiful life. Not a necessity for his survival. If he meets a woman who adds peace, joy, and value to his life, he will welcome her with open arms. But if he doesn't, he will return to his quiet house, make a cup of coffee, and continue living a masterpiece of a life. He has conquered the final boss of male psychology, absolute independence. So, if you are a senior man who has spent years walking the solitary path, understand that you are not behind, you are not broken. You have undergone a psychological transformation that 99% of men will never experience because they are too terrified of being alone. You have learned to see women not as objects, not as solutions, and not as enemies, but simply as human beings. Never let society shame you for the peace you have fought so hard to build. You are the king of your own reality. If this exploration of the senior male psyche has resonated with your journey, or if you are currently walking the solitary path, leave a comment below. What is the greatest lesson you've learned from living alone? If this story changed the way you look at the strength found in solitude, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are uncovering the deep psychological truths that society often tries to bury. Let us build a future of clarity together. The next deep dive into the human mind will begin very soon.